Bonjour et bienvenue. Nous avons aujourd'hui un invité spécial, David Morgan, éditeur du rapport Morgan que vous pouvez trouver sur le site econominet.net. Donc aujourd'hui, on va essayer de mieux connaître David et lui poser quelques questions au sujet des métaux précieux. Donc, bonjour David.
Bonjour.
All right, we'll continue in English then for now.
Okay.
So, it's great to have you. My first question is to introduce you to the French-speaking audience. Could you tell us who David Morgan is and how is he related to precious metals?
Very good. I've been fascinated with money since very early childhood, and I'm old enough that when the currency changed in the United States from 90% silver coinage to coinage with no silver content at all, and that was in 1965, that I noticed that, and I didn't really understand it, but I, instinctively knew that a silver coin had to be worth more than something that was copper and coated with a nickel coating. So that started kind of the thought process. But I started looking into investing at a very early age. I started investing when I was 16 years old. And so I started reading kind of the alternative information and discovered quite quickly what happens in a non-backed currency system. They've always failed. So that really set the fire to me. So I studied it, started trading and investing in precious metals, and I did other investments as well. I've done well with them also, but primarily focusing on the precious metals from my early 20s until present day. So I have a domain for the last 13 years or so with this website, silver-investor.com. And I've built, I think, a pretty good following over the last decade or so, speaking at different conferences, my work on the internet, and various other venues.
All right, thanks. Now, thanks to the internet, a lot of people understood that we are heading towards a financial cliff. So some of them have decided to buy gold and silver to protect themselves. However, gold is 20% down since last year, silver almost 50% down, and the bottle of milk is 20% up. Now I'm thinking I should have bought more milk and less silver. What do you think? In your opinion, why has money printing led to high food prices but not to higher metal prices?
Well, markets are inefficient in the short run and efficient in the long run is my take. In other words, markets do what they're supposed to do, but not exactly at the time that you might expect them to. So when silver made it to $48 nominal price in April of 2011, what we saw really was kind of a forecast to how silver can react. It's a fact that it did that under very emotional conditions that are based primarily upon money printing. I mean, there's lots of things that cause that, but the primary cause, in my view, was the announcement of QE2. When before QE2, silver was it moved from 19 to 26. It's starting to roll over. And it looked like all my indicators were showing it had peaked at 26. And then QE2 was announced, and I got right back in the market, and it moved almost double, 26 to 48. So what I'm saying is that, yes, you're correct. You have to also determine what's the right amount of silver or gold for each individual. Some people probably buy too much. To me, it's a balance.
Yes.
For most people, 10 to 15% is probably plenty. And if you can, just kind of set it aside and don't worry about it and go on with your life. Not that you shouldn't, go on with what you want to do with your life. But a lot of people want to make a big score or whatever. So I hope I answered that question. It's balance. You want to be balanced among your investments, including the precious metals. If you have a very realistic outlook like me, and you're willing to take the extra risk, then you're going to have to sit through periods like this where it's very, very frustrating for basically what seems a very long time. A year in my life is not as meaningful time-wise as it was when I was 6 years old, but still, it's a grind.
Well, some people bought silver at $40, and you partially answered the question now. And they have been waiting for more than a year to break even. Well, at this stage, a lot of them have lost faith or are staying in cash. And on top of that, we only hear about deflation, which means that cash will be more valuable. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, it's a two-part question. It's a great question. Well, number one is the overhead resistance is when someone bought it at 40 and they don't believe anymore. And so the market will get back to 40 and some amount of those people will sell back and break even and tell their wives or tell their husbands, you know, we didn't lose any money. I bought it at 40 and I sold it at 40 and I'm glad I'm out of silver. I don't ever want to touch it again. And once that overhead resistance is overcome, then you set the stage to go up to higher and higher and higher prices. So that's number one. The other part, can you remind me? I'm sorry, what was it? That
It was about deflation.
oh, right. The deflation argument is definitely one I've never ruled out. It could happen, but we're going against 4,000 or 5,000 years of recorded history that a paper currency trumps gold.
Yeah.
And I don't see that in the long run. What I look for in the metals and the paper price is this. You want to see what the purchasing power of the metal is. So for an example, in a true deflation and paper currencies become more valuable, the silver price would be down. So let's take today's example. Let's say that been to 40, we're now at 28 in US dollars, but that $28 today hypothetically might buy you more than 48 did a year ago. Now that's not a true statement, but what I'm trying to make clear is that you don't want to focus too much on the paper price in a deflation or really in an inflation. What you really want to do is you want to take that ounce of silver and you want to go into the marketplace, do it on the internet, go into the real marketplace and find out, what does that buy? Does that buy one loaf of bread, 100 loaves of bread, 1,000 loaves of bread? That's what you really need to focus on. That's hard to do. It takes, a thought change. You got to say, okay, wait a minute. I'm not looking at some arbitrary paper price that changes day to day. Even though the price could be down in paper terms in a true deflation, but yet the purchasing power, like the paper price, would be up.
Yeah.
Now, if you bought at 40 and it's at 28, you sure wish you were in cash. I won't make an excuse for that. But what I'm saying is that you, again, have to focus on the value, not the price.
Okay. Now let's move to the supply-demand equation for silver. It seems that the global economy is slowing down, and therefore the industrial demand for silver should drop. Does that mean that silver is overvalued at $28?
And I think that it's undervalued currently, but the industrial component does play into it. The solar industry, that's one of the biggest off-takes over the last several years and will continue somewhat, has slackened off because of the global recession. A lot of the solar panels are built, particularly in Germany, were government subsidized. With the euro breakdown, there's going to be less solar panel demand than there was previously. So that's flattening out. Although Japan came out and said they're going to install more solar after this nuke incident. When you have a recession or a depression, that there's less demand for everything. And 70% of the silver supply comes as a result of base metal mining. Copper, lead, zinc, and even gold mining contribute over 70% to the silver supply. So if there is a downturn, you're going to naturally get less silver out of the ground. The other one is what happens with the demand that doesn't go away, like all the iPads, iPhones, and all that. There might be less demand, but there's still such a demand, especially in China, that markets that aren't saturated yet, that even though it takes a little bit of silver, there's still pretty good demand. So, yeah, on balance, I think it'll harm the market slightly, but not as much as most people believe.
Okay. And now, other than small retail investors, who else holds silver today?
Very good question. As you know, I have lectured all over the world, and a lot of the lectures from time to time I'll end with silver being the poor man's gold.
Yes.
That's the expression we hear. And I point out, but isn't it interesting that at the bottom of the market, the biggest purchases of silver were Warren Buffett, arguably one of the richest men in the world, his friend Bill Gates, who's arguably one of the other richest men in the world, and George Soros, again, one that hits the Forbes 400. So we're talking billionaires were buying silver, not gold, at the bottom of the market. So I like to point out, even though it's the poor man's gold, it was the smart money, the billionaire class that was moving into silver in a very big manner. So I would say, yeah, look, the market is probably halfway through its cycle, over halfway through its cycle, but the biggest move comes in the last 10% of the time. The last oomph to the market is usually when you get huge moves, and I expect that to be the case again. I think when the silver market doubles in volume, meaning that the 1% of the people that are awake now buying precious metals, and that 1% goes to 2% on a global basis, I think the paper price will be far, far higher than it is now. The problem is I just don't know when that's going to happen, but I do believe we're very close to it, and I think it could happen before the end of the year, possibly not, more likely after the election in the U.S. and probably the first quarter of 2013. Now, that won't be like the rocket ship, but that will be working through the overhead resistance we talked about earlier on this interview, like the $40 level. So it'll be 40, 50. Once we break into new high territory, we could see an acceleration in the price.
Okay. Now some investors, let's move to the mining shares. Now some investors in the precious metal sector would rather have physical metal only. They believe that mining shares are extremely risky because of nationalization and broker bankruptcies like MF Global. What's your opinion on the topic?
Well, my opinion is that they're right. There's risk in all investments, even in the physical realm, but the physical realm is your safest and best. And then you've got to look at yourself and say, what's my risk profile? I have many subscribers that are metal only, that all they have is physical metal, but they still read our work because they want to know timing or what's going on in the silver market or the gold market or other resource stocks or whatever. I think it's worth the risk if you balance it right. For me personally, I'm at about 50-50. In other words, half of the portfolio is in physical metal and the other half is in stocks weighted as I show them in the Morgan report, where safe money is in big top tier stocks and in the mid-tier juniors, and I only bet money I can afford to lose in the speculative section of the report. So I think it's up again to the individual. I think it's worth it. I mean, as much as silver has moved from basically 5 up to 28 currently, six-fold. Some of these stocks, like Silver Standard, went from 65 cents to $40. Pan American went from $1 to 30. We had Western Silver, that was Western Copper when we recommended it. It was a penny stock. And there's several like that. So the gains can be obtained, but you need to have both. I would never want anyone to be in all stocks. And if you want to be in all metal, I don't really have an argument against that. But if you want to take the added risk, it's usually worth the reward. Although this last year has been extremely difficult for all of us, as you know. We have put out more recommendations over the last 4 or 5 months, putting out at least one a month. And the reason we're doing that is this is the time to buy. You buy when it's low. You buy when they're hated. You buy when no one's paying attention. You buy when everyone doesn't want anything to do with them. That's a contrarian. That's what contrarians do. That's what we do. And some of those are actually up fairly substantially from their recommended price, as you know.
Now, from a cycle point of view, this year is an election year in the US. And since 1984, the XAU, the index, hasn't performed well during the election year. And since the year 2000, the XAU performed really well the year following the election. So do you think we'll see the same pattern this time round? And for a precious metal investor, does it make a difference which one of the two candidates will be elected in November?
Well, from my perspective, it doesn't matter which one of the two candidates are elected. To me, it's like changing the captain on the Titanic after it hits the iceberg. The ship's going down. It doesn't matter who's there. It might have a little more impact if Obama is reelected because I think more sophisticated investors, money managers, pension fund managers, and that type of thing, if he's reelected, will get scared about what's going to happen because he'll have his last term and he'll probably get even more aggressive than he's been so far. So that could have a little more of an impact on the precious metals. I agree. I think 2013 will be our year to get through the nominal highs of $48 in silver and the nominal high in gold, which is about 1900. So I think we're going to see a good year in 2013, but again, I don't think we're going to see the real big moves until probably 2014, 15, 16. I don't really know. I think it's out a few years. I think this thing, as bad as it is, can be held together for a little longer, meaning a couple more years. But
now, from a fundamental point of view, the picture has rarely been as bullish as in the past few weeks. the commitment of traders is extremely bullish for precious metals. The swap dealers are net buyers. The yields on the bond are below inflation. And the situation in Europe is not improving. But it doesn't seem that precious metals are picking up. What is your forecast for this year? And do you think we need an event to get these precious metal really picking up?
Yeah, great questions again. My view is that we bottomed. I mean, I know you got my work, you translated to French, and I thank you for that. I think that the bottom was in May for those mining shares. The mining shares, even in a bull market, normally bottom before the metal. I think the metals have bottomed here. I think there's too much pessimism in the market. My forecast is for the metals to base here and move up by the end of the year. I think we see 35 to 40 by the end of the year for silver and 1,800 or so for gold. We still have, 4 months, September, October, November, December. So I think that that's the way I see it. And again, going to 2013 beyond, I think much better. So I am pretty bullish here, actually, and most people are bearish. So again, I'm a contrarian within the contrarian camp, I guess.
Now let's talk about your newsletter. Well, as my viewers know, they can find the French version of your monthly newsletter on the website econominet.net. So my question is, what is available for the reader, and what is the main difference between your newsletter and most of the other ones covering precious metals?
Oh, very good. Well, what they can expect to find is, heart and soul in the letter. I've got a research team that's, I think, one of the best in the industry. Most of the smaller companies we actually visit, so that we just don't take somebody's word for it. We'll actually go on a property. But what's different is, I think, that we look for value. We're very diligent about what we do. We're very serious about what we do. Unfortunately, a lot of the newsletter industry focuses on very, very small cap stocks that really don't have good management or good projects. And why they do this, I don't know. But those things can make you money, but it's rare indeed. You have about a 1 in 4,000 shot in doing that. Whereas if you do what we teach, which is to balance your portfolio between top tier, mid tier, and speculative stocks, you're going to come out a lot better in the long run. It might not be as exciting as your friends that bought XYZ mining for a few pennies and it's worth a few dollars, but that again is a rare thing.
All right. Any comment you would like to add before we finish the interview?
I'd like to say I've been to France a few times. My great-grandmother was 100%, excuse me, my great-grandmother was 100% French, immigrated to this country, never spoke English her whole life. A wonderful woman, and my mother spoke French. And when I was a little kid, I would go to visit my great-grandmother with my mom, and I was a little small. I mean, I was like 5 years old, and they immediately started speaking French. And at that time, I thought, oh my goodness, they are having an adult language. I guess you get to a certain age, you speak an adult language, and they speak this English stuff to us small kids. I figured that out pretty soon. I was wrong on that, but and I wish all of you the very best.
Right, great. Thank you very much, David, for your time, and hope we'll see you soon then. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.